So welcome. We are going to dive right into talking about PSAT, also known as the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. That's what that long NMSQT stands for. So we're going to dive right in, get talking about this test. Hopefully, if your child has already taken the PSAT as a 9th, 10th, or 11th grader, perhaps that you have those scores in front of you because we're going to help make sense. I'm going to go ahead real quick, though, and launch a poll. I'd like to know if everybody who is on has a 9th, 10th, 11th grader or other students. So go ahead and, if you don't mind participating, select what grade your child's in, hit submit at the bottom. Looks like we have some 11th graders. We've got mostly 10th graders on, but an almost equal number of 11th graders. Still collecting some responses here. Okay. 10th graders are outnumbering our 11th graders this time. So, okay, well, we're going to have great information for 9th, 10th, and 11th graders. Go ahead and close that out right now. Share our results. So that's who we've got on our webinar today. This is great information, though, for students, for families with students of all ages in high school. So we will go ahead and get rid of that and keep going. Okay, so PSAT, what is it? Let's first get it defined pretty well for you. So it is, as it stands for, the pre-SAT. We're basically looking at the same or similar skills, just not as challenging as the SAT. So it is actually aimed to be a pre-SAT. It doubles as the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test only in the 11th grade. So we're going to, towards the end, talk about how that works and what that counts as. So what we find is many 11th graders take this nationally each October. It is a test with a standard test date. It's given one time a year. So if you, as an 11th grader, if you're taking it for national merit purposes. So it's given one time a year. This past year in 2019, it was on October the 16th. Some schools opted to do it the Saturday afterward. Some schools will give it to every single 11th grader, every single 10th grader in their building. Others will give it to, not everybody. It'll be your option if you want to take it. Sometimes you even have to go to another school. What we find is, if I look at trends, I would say we are seeing more and more schools giving it to their 10th graders. That is to locate those students who might have that national merit scholar potential, because with that, depending on your college choice, could come free college. There was a student that I was aware of. Their high school was not giving the PSAT to all their 10th graders. This was a younger child of a family leap we were already working with. I already knew the family well. I knew the kid was, their 10th grader was academically talented, so I contacted them and said, hey, you should take this. So in many schools, it's your option. That's why you really need to be aware of what test your school is given. And sometimes you have to speak up. They're not going to just automatically give it to you or identify. So that's who's typically taking it. So why do we at LEAP value students taking the PSAT? First of all, we find it to be terrific practice. So one of the things that we know about our ACT and SAT prep and testing that we do with students is there are very few times in the life of a student that they are going to have to sit for about over 3 hours. They're at the test site really for almost 4 hours. The ACT and the SAT themselves are right around 3 hours. That's a long time to sit for a test, and our kids are not practiced at that. So it's part of what we do when we're doing test prep is build that endurance. But when there's an opportunity to take a test like the PSAT, or many of your schools also give the pre-ACT, that's fantastic practice for learning how to just sit for a test. We're also exposing the students to the format and types of the tests that they're going to see when they take the ACT or SAT when they're doing this pre-testing. It will help students determine in the 11th grade if they are better suited for the ACT or the SAT. Now, we have people on this evening from all over the United States. I live in Cincinnati, And so we've got a majority of people that are on the webinar today are local to Ohio, but we've got people from both coasts on actually today as I look at who's attending. In Ohio, we find that more students take the ACT and the SAT. However, statistically, we know that 25% of students will do better on the ACT, 25% will do better on the SAT. Having PSAT scores in advance of ACT and SAT testing will help you determine either in advance or even after the fact, even if you've already started, if you need to add the opposite test. So in Ohio, that usually looks like a family is taking the ACT, we get PSAT scores, and we may say, hey, you know, you look like you might be better suited to the SAT, get higher scores, so let's give the SAT a try. The PSAT would help us figure that out, and we're going to show you how. We also find that the PSAT can be very helpful in determining course selection. So in the greater Cincinnati area, that'll start anywhere from mid-January to mid-February at local high schools. The students are choosing what they're going to take in the remaining years of high school. And then finally, national merit qualification, which for some people could end up being free college. So who do we recommend takes it? If your school is giving you an option and they're not identifying, we believe that either all 10th graders should take the PSAT or at the very least, those honors and high achieving students. Ask if you attend a high school, if you have, so let's say you're on and you have an 11th grader this year, but you also have younger children, and your school district for 10th graders is going to give the pre-ACT or do something else with those kiddos that day, a community service day or something, then there is value in having a high achieving, maybe a student who is identified gifted and in the gifted program in middle school and elementary school, having them take the PSAT to see if they're hitting benchmarks for likelihood of national merit qualification in their junior year. In 11th grade, while we do think that there's value in taking the PSAT, many students at this point have turned their attention to ACT and SAT, so it's really only going to count for those top students who are trying to qualify for national merit. The bottom line is no colleges ever see PSAT scores. The only thing they would ever know if a student does qualify for as a national merit semifinalist or finalist and win national merit scholarship money that comes with that, they will know that they scored in the top 1% of the students. But they would never even at that point know their exact score. So the colleges will not be aware, so there's no, people get nervous about pre-ACT, PSAT, nobody sees it. It is really, truly just practice for the student and for the family and the school counseling and your independent counselors use in advising you. So what does the PSAT look like? Well, it is, as I already mentioned, based off the SAT, it's a slightly easier test. So the idea behind the PSAT is it is normed for those students who have completed 10th grade. Since it's given in the fall of 11th grade, the level of academic rigor would match that we would expect any student who has, in college prep classes, who has completed the 10th grade would be ready for this test. Now, many of your 10th graders are taking it, but those a lot of times are our accelerated or honor students if it's by choice. What goes along with taking as a 10th grader, you might see slightly lower scores, and you would expect to see some academic growth and a higher score in the junior year. It's just short of the SAT length. So the SAT is actually 3 hours. The PSAT is 2 hours and 45 minutes with 138 questions. There are essentially, when I say two sections, there's two sections that are scored. One is called evidence-based reading and writing, and the other one is the math. However, across those two section scores, we have 4 subtests that we're going to look at. A perfect score is 1520, where the SAT perfect score is 1600. And unlike the SAT, there is no essay that is even optional to go ahead and take. So it is a little bit different, but you can see that they're very similar as well. These tests are concorded. So when we say that the scores concord, a PSAT of 1120 equals an SAT of 1120, that means that if an 11th grader in the fall of their 11th grade year took the PSAT found out that they scored 1120, that student would be expected on the SAT later that spring to score the same without any prep, without any, if they weren't studying, that's what they would expect to get. Now, your scores became available to you on December the 10th, 2019. There are paper score reports that perhaps your school gave you. It's just couple pages. And there are online scores available at PSAT.org. If you are having trouble accessing your scores online, then we do actually have a blog post that walks you through the steps of trying to find those. So you can just hop over to the LEAP blog and look for the post that says, where are my PSAT scores? And then I'll walk you through how to get those scores into your account. Now, this is what you would have. This is actually available both online and it is available on the paper report, this image. There aren't a lot of images and data on the paper report any longer. There used to be, but there really isn't any longer. So you'll see this block, and that's a kind of a snapshot of the scores. And then you'll also see this block. We're going to walk through what each of these means. So with that in mind, you've got to go online. So anybody who's on today, that means you're interested in this for whatever reason, to help your kid, to see if they might qualify for national merit. You've got to get into your online account or you're not going to get the most valuable information. I'm going to show you what that is. So how is this scored? So there's the reading and the writing score. That is on a scale of 160 to 760 points. That is added up with the math score, which is also 160 to 760. And we add those up for a total score. So the minimum score that you would get would be a 320, and the highest score a student could get would be a 1520. Now, when you look at that, and you go back to that total score that you see, so unlike if you're familiar with pre-ACT and ACT, it's actually an average of the 4 parts of the test. PSAT and SAT are a total of all of the sections. So, for instance, this student scored a 960, which put this student in the 51st percentile. So meaning that, they are in the top half of testers. This is also then this student's predicted SAT score. Keep that in mind. Remember, they can chord perfectly. So how do we read this PSAT score report? So when we see this top section, we have that total score. So remember, going back just real quickly, that total score is this number, and this gives you your national percentile score. You are in the 51st percentile of all students. Now we break it down, and we look at both basically what we could call the English portion of the test, the official name, evidence-based reading and writing score. That writing, even though it sounds like you're probably writing an essay, you cannot, somebody's asking me how they can see the visual part of the presentation. You've got to log in from your computer to be able to see what everybody else is seeing. So, because we are showing our monitor. So I refreshed it in case you're having problems with that. Okay, going back to the scores here. So the evidence-based reading and writing, that writing is not writing an essay. Those are all multiple choice questions. So number 1 up here, this tells you mathematically what your raw score converted to on a scale score. So that's what the number 1 is, and that is only for the English portion of the test. The second thing that you notice is this is the percentile score. So where this student was 51st percentile overall, this student was in the 31st percentile for English, for the English portion of the test. And then finally, they have this college and career readiness benchmark. This benchmark relates to the predicted future success of a student testing, okay? It doesn't mean that if you are in the approaching benchmark or needs to strengthen in the red, that you're not going to be able to get into college. That's not at all what this is saying. So it's just telling you where your skills need to be worked on. So for this student, the benchmark on the English portion of the test is 460. This student scored a 430, and this puts them in the yellow, meaning that they're approaching that benchmark. They're almost up there. So they need to really work a little bit more on that area in the English of what's being assessed, which we're going to look at in a second. So you're in the red, the yellow, or the green as it relates to that college readiness benchmark. Math, same thing. We've got the scale score. So the student is a stronger math tester. They're in the 69th percentile, and they are in the green, so they're exceeding the college readiness benchmark. Once you get online, so this information, if anybody, you used to get this information on the paper report. That is no longer available on the paper report, and actually some schools are no longer even giving a paper report. So this is why, if a few people have gotten on after the beginning, I just want to remind everyone, you have got to find a way to get into your account at psat.org to get the deeper information. So there's a section on there called Score Details. So this is where we're going ahead and we're looking at, now we've gone from those two scores, evidence-based reading and writing and math, and now we're breaking it into 3 scores. So these 3 scores are, you actually get a score for reading, writing and language, which we'll look at what that's testing in a second, and then math. Even though there were 2 math sections, it's going to go into 1 score. This gives you a quick snapshot. So this student, as you can see, was weaker on the reading section than they were on the writing and language. This writing and language is heavy on the grammar. And then the math, obviously, is the strength. For each of these, it gives you a snapshot then. There were 47 test questions on the reading. This student got 10 of them correct, 35 of them incorrect. And this yellow on each of these is my own personal highlight that I put in once I went ahead and screenshot an online account. So there were 2 questions that this student did not answer, so they were omitted. There was 1 on the writing and language. Why do I point that out? ACT and SAT, as well as pre-ACT and PSAT, none of them penalize a student for guessing. So a student should never, ever leave anything blank when they're taking the ACT or the SAT. So one of the first things I would say to this student is you should have guessed on the 3 questions that you left blank. These are multiple choice, especially on the English. There are a handful of questions in the math that are not multiple choice, but these were multiple choice questions, so you always put something down. If you're running out of time, we tell students, if they call 1 minute remaining and the student looks down and there's 10 questions to go, they should just pick a column and fill it out all the way down. Hopefully that they're picking up a point. So this is just giving you a snapshot of that. Now, going right along, we're going to look at the skills assessed. So there are some cross-test scores that you will only see online, analysis of science and analysis in history or social studies. History and social studies will relate to sometimes historical documents, maybe you're reading of a map. It will, and then the science, and most people are aware that the pre-ACT and the ACT actually have a full science section. On the PSAT and SAT, what happens is the scientific related questions, which are basically data, charts, graphs that you have to read, are embedded throughout the test instead of having their own section. So this is a cross test so that you can see really how you're doing on the analysis, higher level testing skills. Another thing that we get is they actually break down, this is the breakdown of English. So they're taking the skills that are assessed, command of evidence, words in context, that's vocabulary, okay? That's how you do with your vocabulary. Command of evidence would be a reading skill. Expression of ideas would be a writing skill. And then standard of English conventions is the grammar portion of the test. So this kind of breaks it out further for you. So you can really, one of the strengths that you get by going online is that you actually see what the student's doing well on and what they aren't doing so well on. So this particular individual struggles a little bit with some of the reading skills, but has a strength in grammar. So that lets them know what they should focus on. The ACT and the SAT are so similar now, which has been the case since March 2016, that let's say that you had PSAT results, but your student was only going to take the ACT. This would still tell you the types of skills where your student has a strength and has a weakness. So there is a value there. Even if you're, let's say you have a junior, you're on, you know that your student's taking the ACT at school for free on February 25th or March 10th. This would give you an idea of still where they're weak, and these weaknesses would show up on the ACT as well. So there's value for both ACT and SAT in this PSAT report. Here are the areas for math. What you're going to find on the SAT, or the PSAT, is some math, and this is just like on the pre-ACT as well. The math is only going into some geometry. It doesn't touch on Algebra 2, which is considered an 11th grade, a standard 11th grade math course. I know that many people that are on, their students are accelerated in math. They've taken Algebra 2 in 10th grade or sometimes even earlier. So those students have had math that far surpasses what is assessed on the PSAT, but it's just not going to be assessed on this. So you can see a big range here on what this student was doing well on. So reading, what is it? Students will encounter a variety of passages, including those graphics that I indicated, maps, charts, graphs, things like that. It's called evidence-based reading because a student literally has to go into the passage and find the evidence that you can literally go through and maybe like underline where the evidence is to answer the question. You are going to use vocabulary, but these vocabulary words on the PSAT and the SAT were pulled way back in 2016. So they will be words that the student should academically be using in their reading and their writing in high school and college. They're no longer those rare words that even we as adults were like, what? I've never heard of that word before. And there is some interpretation as well. In the writing and language, it's really, grammar's going to be the heaviest thing here, and you're going to have to, no student needs to know, what an object of a preposition is, but they have to be able to identify the errors within the passages and correct them. So we don't need to, I know students don't go ahead and, work with the grammar as much anymore, and they're not diagramming sentences any longer, but they do have to be able to identify what is wrong. A lot of times kids rely a little too heavily on their ear. That can be a good starting point, but it's just like a lot of people say, if I was, and that's incorrect. If I were, which doesn't sound correct to a lot of people, is the correct grammar. So that's what they're really focusing on in the writing and language. Math, kids get really surprised and very nervous by. There is both a calculator and a non-calculator question. So on that math score, if you noticed before, we only have one math score where reading and grammar, writing, were broken out. The two math sections go into only one math score. So what does that tell you on the PSAT? English is weighed more heavily than math on that total score because it's 3 of the scores going into that total score instead of 1. That's the same thing for if you have a student who is competing for national merit. Sometimes these kids you just have to say that the kids who are excelling in English have a little bit better chance because that is the 2/3 of the score instead of 1/3 of the score. So the math, both the calculator and non-calculator questions, this is one place where not everything is multiple choice. So there are a handful of questions on the math portions of the test where the student literally uses pencil and paper, their calculator, they solve the problem, and then they just have to write the answer down in a grid. So they do tend to, when I say real-world problem solving, what am I talking about? Story problems, lots of story problems where they're actually applying their math concepts that they know. So that's what you can expect as far as what we're doing. So that's how it all breaks out as far as telling you, okay, here's what the skills were assessed, here's how you were doing on that, here's what your score is. Now let's take it one more level in your online account and go ahead and help our students learn from their mistakes. One of the values of us taking the ACT and the PSAT and the pre-ACT is to have information that we can use to better prepare for our ACT and our SAT testing that we might take. So this is actually a screenshot from within the online account. I thought about just going on an online account, but I thought if the internet crashes on their end, their host site, then it probably wouldn't have been good. So when you log in, you're going to see across the top, score overview, we already did that. Score details, we already did that. Now let's go on to test questions. So you literally log in, go to test questions. We're going to show you for reading, writing and language, math without a calculator, math with a calculator, the actual questions that the student was given. So that's one of the benefits of the PSAT. You actually get your test, basically. Here's how it works. So for the reading, this is the one where I did for the reading section, 47 questions total, 21 correct answers on this one, 25 incorrect, one that they skipped. Remember, that's a caution sign. They should not be skipping anything. They have coded all of the questions, easy, medium, and hard. Here is what they're using the symbols that are representing to show you what's correct, omitted. Unscorable would mean that the kids scribbled maybe, or they changed their answer, so they erased, but they really couldn't tell which was the final answer. And then multi-gridded incorrect gets an X. Oop, sorry, let's go back. Okay, and then down here at the bottom, when you go to the reading test questions, you're also able to filter the test questions by all answers means that what I got correct, what I got incorrect, what difficulty, if you wanted to just pull up the hard questions, and how they relate to the sub-scores. So that's our grid, remember. When you go below, so you scroll down from here, the next thing you're going to see is this. Now we've got the questions. This tells you what the correct answer was. This tells you what the student's answer was, how difficult the question was, and then if it propagated into one of the sub-scores. So you can start to get a real idea. So these are literally hyperlinks, okay? So you click on question 1, click there, and this is what pops up. You absolutely get to see the whole question. So not only do you see the question, shows you the question, and gives you, you come over here, and then you click View Answer and Explanation. It will tell you the correct answer, and then it will explain why that is the correct answer. At this point then, you can, at the bottom, go on to question number 2, if you wanted to go through each question, or you go back to the test questions. So that's where you would really want to go through, go, okay, I got question 2 wrong. Let's look and see what question 2 is about. Why did I get these incorrect? Okay. Question 4, why did I get that incorrect? Instead of taking your time and going through all the correct answers. Somebody's asking a question about, are these scores available for the practice test that was taken on Saturday? Yes. So, as I mentioned before, Wednesday in October, this past year, Wednesday, October 16th, was the date that it was given nationally. And they, on Saturday, some schools did it on Saturday. The Saturday students were not able to keep their test booklets, but they do get the score information, is my understanding. I've not known somebody to not get that. Okay, moving right along. So we get to see the questions. Every single question is on here. When you're scoring, you get 1 raw point for every correct answer. No deductions made for the incorrect answers. That's why we leave nothing blank on any of these tests that we take. Pre-ACT, PSAT, ACT, or SAT, and then those raw scores are converted to the scaled score that we looked at earlier. Okay, at the top, now that we've gone through and that we've actually seen, you can go through question by question for all 4 subtests on the test. The next thing that we gain, this is going back again in the menu at the top when you log into your account, I want us to pay attention to Skills Insight. Skills Insight is basically giving a summary of the skills that the student is great on and weak on. So that section, this time I went ahead and I pulled up the writing and language test. On this particular test, this will show you over here that the student scored a 20 on a scale of 8 to 38. That is on the low side of the yellow. So this is an area then that you would say, you know what, you really need improvement in this area. However, everything in this left column is saying this is what you were doing well. You've got this. However, this is really what you need to work on. You really need to work on this. Families sometimes call us with 9th graders saying, you know, or early 10th graders, oh, we're ready for ACT prep. And we actually try to talk our families out of starting actual ACT or SAT prep too early. However, what I do say to families who start thinking about test prep in 9th and 10th grade is there are skills that you can be building in 8th, 9th, and 10th grade that will later benefit these test scores. So building skills is not bad. We just don't want to burn students out on the actual ACT and SAT test. So skill building is actually good. So the Skills Insight can really let you know, what it is, maintaining subject, verb, and pronoun agreement. So that's great. Okay. However, this is where you really could use some work. So that's something that could be just regular tutoring, practice on your own, outside of even the test-taking scenario. So you've got that information for all of the tests. Okay, so let's talk about we're getting ready to go into high school scheduling season. What does that mean? So there is a section. It's a little bit different. Go back here. So when you log in, you see this towards the top. However, at the very top, you see student score reports. This is not part of the PSAT scores. However, a student's AP potential, that's what this yellow is right here across the very top, is made up from how they're testing on PSATs, SATs, anything that they're taking through the College Board. So to get to this information, you're not on that same menu. You need to go up to the very top of your account and click AP Potential. So essentially what they're doing is across all the different advanced placement classes that are offered, and this was for this student, this was coming from their SAT with essay that they took in March of 2019. But if you took PSAT, so anything on the College Board would relate to this. So for this student, it's saying their best, and I did not get the full list. There's more AP courses offered than is listed here. But their best potential just over these that we're looking for would be on AP Psychology. They've got 2 of the green dots. So the more dots filled in, the higher likelihood that the student would be able to score a 3, 4, or 5 on the AP exam. Now, while it says your school offers this course, look for this student. The school, their high school is not offering the course. Some schools don't have that information in there, so don't rely only on that. You need to go ahead, if a school doesn't upload what they're offering at their school, then that part wouldn't be accurate, but the AP potential would be accurate. Now, I do not believe that this is the end-all, be-all. I think this is one additional tool that we have in our toolbox when we're determining what classes that we should take in high school. So, look at your AP potential. Look at what AP classes your high school is offering. Colleges only hold you accountable for taking what they deem to be appropriate rigor for you for what AP classes you have offered at your class. So if you go to a very small high school and you only have, 4 AP classes offered, and you just don't have a lot of options, then you're not going to be held accountable for not being able to take them. So, but in addition to how you're testing, some kids just aren't great test takers, and some students, my oldest, who's in his 20s, he never did well on the PSAT or the SAT. He did very, very well on the ACT. So there was a huge discrepancy in how he tested on those 2 tests. So keep that in mind. I would never have let just his AP potential score dictate what classes he took in high school. So instead, you really need to talk to your current teachers. They are well aware of how you perform in their class. Your current teachers are going to know the rigor of the other teachers that are teaching in the building and the classes that you're going to be taking. So think of those things. And then consider your future academic goals. Most colleges do not expect you to have AP everything. So sometimes when families ask me to weigh in on what they should be taking, for sophomore, junior, senior year as they're going through, and we're looking at what their academic goals are, college, career goals. If a student is going into, say, a STEM field, is there a high value in AP art or in AP English? It's not going to have as high of a value. So you need to think about who you are, and you've got to have, I really strongly believe, in a school life balance for students. They shouldn't be stressed out all the time. So that's not good. So AP everything is, for most kids, not the way to go. That's not the case for all kids, but that's, for most kids. Because what colleges are really looking at these are the top things that they're looking at. So recommendation letters, test scores, essays, activities, rigor of the courses that you're taking, and your class rank. So we're actually going to sort those out. I think it's February 5th. We have a free webinar, What Colleges Want. So feel free we're going to sort these out in order of importance and talk about how the colleges look at those. So that's our trends and admissions, What Colleges Want. It's a free offering. But there's a lot that goes into whether you're getting into college, not just the class that you take. So it's about the whole package. So think about it within context. So let's talk about those high scores. We're going to talk about high scores or low scores, because I know I've got people on today that some people are thinking, gosh, my kid did fantastic. And there's those of you that got a score report, and you're like, oh my word, we've got some work to do. So what does that mean? So those high scores, potentially you might be looking at National Merit Scholarship qualification. Remember that your qualification is based only on your 11th grade selection index score. So the selection index score is given in 2 places. It's given on the paper report that you get if your school gave that to you, but it's also immediately available on the online report. It is out of 228. So when you're looking at that number in context, a perfect selection index is 228. Now, here's how this works. Students in their junior year of high school take the October PSAT. We just got those scores for the class of 2021. The scores just came available in December. So on December 10th for Ohio, those scores came out. Your selection index was available. As you can see, the selection index is a moving target. So 4 years ago, the qualifying selection index score for Ohio was 217. Then it jumped up 2 points. It was 219 for 2 years in a row. And then this year, for the class of 2020, it dropped to 218. So we are predicting that for those who are in the current sophomore class, 2022, the 218 would be the likely score. And that range, it could go down maybe as low to 216 or jump up to 220, is the predicted range. So you take the test, you get your scores in December, and then you don't find out if you're a qualifier until September of your senior year. That's when they say what the selection index is. So 11th grade families that are on our webinar today, so that is 36% of the people that are on. If your student scored somewhere in that, 217 to 220, it looks favorable that they have a strong likelihood of qualifying as a national merit semifinalist. That then would mean another application, essay, things like that, principal's recommendation letter to receive to do in the fall of your senior year, and then finalists are announced every February. I've only ever known from our LEAP test prep students who prepped for national merit with us, and we've been doing this for years, and we have, national merit qualifiers every single year come out of our program. I've only known one kid who was a semifinalist who wasn't a finalist, and it was his GPA that kept him out of it. And I even told the mom before they did test prep, I said, you really shouldn't prep because he's not going to be a finalist. There's no money in being a semifinalist, because his GPA is below a 3.0, and this was a student who just hadn't worked well in school. Another family that we worked with, this kid had actually scored 220, I think it was, in his sophomore year. Unfortunately, you can't qualify in your sophomore year. So the mom had talked to us about, should we do test prep? And I said, just because you got a 220 doesn't mean you're going to get a 220 or higher the next year. So this was a St. Xavier High School student. They felt that his score was strong enough that they were going to forego any test prep leading to his 11th grade PSAT test. That was their option. We gave them the options. They said, no, thank you. So he took the test and went down, got a 216, and he did not make, in his junior year, the National Merit Semifinalist cutoff because his score actually dropped. He hadn't done any prep at all. They then ended up doing ACT prep with us, and he got a perfect 36 on the ACT. So I think had he put in the work of tutoring and actually being prepped and ready to go for his October junior year PSAT score, getting a perfect ACT later, I'm sure that he would have qualified. So don't count on the fact that just because you tested well your sophomore year that it's a natural that you're going to get it. We believe strongly that you've got to get some practice in before that. So if you're a 10th grade family and you have a student with a selection index of 195 or higher, those are the families that we think should do the summer. We have a summer program, starts in June, goes through August. Some people opt to not do it in summer and do it instead in the fall. That's fine too. We have that available as well. But we find great success with just June through August. Come in, tutor weekly, take your test in October, and you're good to go. If you're interested in that, let us know. Okay, what if you're on the other end? So I have 3 kids. My 3 kids are wildly different. They all test very differently. What if you're looking at the score report right now and you go, I am disappointed. I am shocked. You have time to improve. Even if you are a junior family that is on the webinar, it is not over. College applications are going to be due at their very earliest 10 months from right now, October 15th, so 10 months from this week. I know that's coming up fast, though. Actually, at LEAP, we encourage you to start your college applications in June. So more on that later. Stay tuned. Just planting that seed. If you have a 9th or a 10th grader and you're disappointed, then we're in that skill building. But, it just could be that ACT is the test for you. You may, and this is my oldest son, who was a fantastic student, fantastic test taker, but he was a horrible PSAT and SAT taker. He did very well in the ACT. So, consider that for what it's worth. So how do you start to think about, okay, how do PSAT and SAT compare? How do SAT and ACT compare? What does that look like? So here's how the PSAT and the ACT, remember, if you scored 1150 on the PSAT, that means that you would expect to do an 1150 on the SAT. On the LEAP site, if you go over to the LEAP site, we have both on our home page and on our ACT, SAT prep page, this sliding scale. So this, I can't do it because this is just a screenshot, but this little green dot slides along here. So this student, let's say they got an 1100 on the PSAT, this is saying that the equivalent ACT or pre-ACT is a 22. Now, what would you do with this? Let's say that this student took a pre-ACT in 10th grade, took a PSAT in October of 11th grade, and on their pre-ACT they got a 25. On their PSAT they got an 1100. Then that means that the PSAT was the weaker, the SAT, PSAT is the weaker test, and the student should focus only on the ACT or the SAT. Let's say it's reversed. Let's say the student gets an 1100 on the PSAT, but they only got a 19 on their pre-ACT, okay? Now we know that the student is testing better on the SAT, so that student, even if their high school is giving the ACT on the state test day, which most of them are, not all of them, but most of them are, then this student needs to work out a plan where they're also taking the SAT. If you want individual input on that, so Sherry Elmore in our office, she is our ACT, SAT director, and she answers all your questions related to this. So she will help you figure out ACT, SAT, or sometimes both, and that's the least comfortable answer for that. So got another question. Do 11th graders still have another chance to qualify for, it says financial semifinalist. I'm guessing you mean national merit semifinalist? No. So here's how national merit works. The step one of qualification is only how you did. It is unfair. It is only how you did on that one test, that one day. And, if kid gets sick on that day, tough. It doesn't matter. They're out of the game. And that really is part of the problem with how they do national merit. I don't like it. I think they should change it up and maybe have various ways to qualify. But the only way to qualify is how you score on the PSAT on that one day in October in your junior year. Unfortunately, I don't feel that it's fair, and I'm sure others agree with me. How predictive are the this is another question that came in. How predictive are the PSAT 8-9 scores for a student who takes that exam in the fall of 9th grade? College Board would tell you that they're still very predictive. What we have found is they're less predictive, and I also would say that there's not a lot of schools in the area giving PSAT 8-9. So for me to say I've seen that be less predictive is according to a smaller sample than when I'm looking at the standard PSAT. So PSAT 8-9 is, again, it's modeled after the PSAT for those of you that are listening in and don't know what that is. But it, again, is pulling that level down to an 8th, 9th grade level. But what it is, they say concorded, but I have found it to be slightly less predictive. So those are excellent questions. So you can go ahead and email Sherry. Just use this info@leaprogram.com. She'd be happy to help you, or get on our calendar, or pick up the phone and call the office. So, are there any other questions that you guys might have? So this is really just on that PSAT. I know that coming up on Wednesday, we have another webinar on understanding ACT results. So if you've already taken an ACT, you can go ahead and jump in on that. We also have planning seminars coming up, and we just opened up last week on March 14th. There is a free diagnostic ACT test for those who want to get a baseline for free and not an official score, so that it doesn't have to be recorded. So looks like we are maybe finished with questions. So thank you everyone for joining us. We really appreciate it. Oh, here we've got another one. Have test scores from Saturday practice test ACT. So LEAP gave a diagnostic ACT this past Saturday, and I believe they were being sent out today. But if you didn't get yours, email Sherry. Her assistant was out sick today with a stomach bug. There's a lot of that going on. So, but if you don't have yours, if you have a Gmail account, for some reason our emails have been going to spam lately, so check your spam folder. So, okay, thank you everyone. Have a great rest of the week.